The morning I walked out of Hargrove Engineering for the last time, I thought I was stepping into the best chapter of my life. 35 years. 35 winters driving the same stretch of I-94 before dawn, the same bad coffee from the break room, the same handshake from the same security guard named Pete, who had worked the front desk longer than I had. And now, it was over. I had my pension, my health, and most importantly, I had time. Time to fix the back porch. Time to finally read the stack of books gathering dust on my nightstand. Time to breathe. What I didn't know, standing in that parking lot with a box of desk photos and a company pen I'd accidentally kept for 2 decades, was that the hardest part of my life wasn't behind me. It was waiting for me at home. My name is Edward. I'm 64 years old. My wife, Carol, passed away from cancer 8 years ago, and there isn't a single morning I don't reach for her side of the bed before I'm fully awake. We had one son together, Derek. We raised him in a brick colonial in Dearborn, Michigan, the same house Carol and I bought the year after our wedding, the same house where Derek took his first steps across the kitchen linoleum and broke his arm falling out of the oak tree in the backyard. After Carol died, Derek moved back in. He was 24 then, and I told myself it made sense. He'd just broken up with someone, just lost his mother, just needed steadying. That's what fathers do. They steady things. I told myself the same thing the following year, and the year after that. By the time Derek turned 31, he had brought Vanessa into the house. She was younger than him by a few years, loud in a way that filled every room she walked into. And she had opinions about everything, my furniture, my cooking smells, the thermostat, the way I loaded the dishwasher. I kept quiet. She was my son's girlfriend, and I kept telling myself that things would settle, that the two of them would find their footing and eventually their own place. They never looked. What they did find was my credit card number. I'd shared it with Derek once, years ago, for an emergency car repair. I thought nothing of it. I didn't check statements closely enough. I was still working 50-hour weeks, eating lunch at my desk, running numbers on structural load calculations for bridges I'd never cross. By the time I sat down with my bank statements really sat down, I found charges I didn't recognize, restaurants, spa packages, a weekend in Chicago, concert tickets. I confronted Derek about it once, gently, the way I always did everything with him. He said Vanessa had miscommunicated about which card to use. He said he'd pay me back. He gave me $200 in cash the following Friday, and I let myself believe the matter was resolved because I needed to believe it, because the alternative that my son was stealing from me in my own home was something I didn't know how to hold. So I held on to something easier. Hope. I cut back. I didn't stop them from charging the card again because I didn't want the confrontation, but I adjusted my own spending to compensate. I started buying the off-brand soup, the day-old bread. I told myself it didn't matter, that I wasn't one of those men who needed comfort food, that I was fine. Meanwhile, Derek and Vanessa ate takeout from the Thai place 3 miles away. The good one. The one Carol and I used to save for anniversaries. I watched all of this from behind a newspaper I wasn't really reading. When the retirement date finally came, Derek seemed genuinely happy about it. That surprised me. He hugged me in the kitchen the morning I put in my final notice and said, "Dad, this is great. You deserve it." I felt something loosen in my chest. Maybe I had been reading things wrong. Maybe things would be different now. Vanessa said the retirement party had to be at the house. She said a restaurant would be too impersonal, that my colleagues deserved to see where I really lived, see the man behind the work. I should have known then. She had never once offered to host anything for me, but I was so pleased by the gesture that I stocked the refrigerator, ordered a catered tray of food from the Italian place on Michigan Avenue, and borrowed folding chairs from my neighbor Frank. Frank is 71. He was a machinist for 40 years and has a handshake that could crack a walnut. He's the kind of man who shows up, and he has been showing up at my door since Carol died, with casseroles, with football on TV, with silence when silence was all I needed. He came over the afternoon before the party and helped me set up the folding tables on the back porch. And while we worked, he said, "Ed, you doing all right? You seem like a man who's got something sitting on his chest." I told him I was fine. He gave me a look that meant he didn't believe me, but would let it go for now. About 30 people came. Former coworkers, a few neighbors, my old project manager, Linda, who drove in from Ann Arbor. Carol's sister flew in from Phoenix. I hadn't seen her in 2 years. She stood in the doorway with her arms open, and I had to press my jaw tight to hold myself together. For the first hour, it was wonderful. I stood on the back porch with a beer and watched people fill the yard, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, something close to joy. Linda gave a short toast about a bridge project we'd worked on together in 2009, and people laughed at the right moments. Frank stood by the food table and made sure no one's glass ran dry. Derek was charming. That's one thing I'll say for my son, he can work a room. He circulated with Vanessa on his arm, shaking hands, laughing at stories, playing the role of the proud son with the ease of someone who had practiced. I watched him from across the yard, and for a moment I let myself believe it again, that we were okay, that this was our family. It was Vanessa who said it first. She was standing near the kitchen door with 2 women I didn't recognize, friends of hers who had arrived uninvited midway through the party. I was passing by to refill the chip bowl when I heard her say it, clearly, not lowering her voice at all. Honestly, I'm a little worried. He's going to be home all day now. Every single day. That's going to be a lot. One of her friends murmured something sympathetic. Derek and I have been talking about it, Vanessa continued. We need our space. We need our life. And now, he's just going to be here. She said here the way you'd say it about a piece of furniture that no longer fits the room. I kept walking. I set the chip bowl down on the table. I stood there for a moment with my back to the yard, staring at the kitchen window. And I understood something that had been forming in me for years. Slowly, the way ice forms over a lake, quiet and patient and inevitable. Then Derek found me. He came in through the back door about 20 minutes later, when the crowd had thinned a little and people were sorting into smaller conversations. I was standing by the mantel where Carol's photo sits, the one from our 20th anniversary trip to Asheville. I had my hand on my beer and I was just standing there, looking at her. Derek came to stand beside me. He'd had a few drinks. I could tell by the way his voice came out a little looser, a little larger than usual. Hey, Dad, he said. Linda was saying you actually thought about staying on another 2 years. Is that true? I considered it, I said. But no. He nodded slowly, looking at the photo, and then he said it loud enough that Carol's sister, standing 6 feet away, could hear every word. Probably better you didn't. Honestly, Dad, what would you have even come home to? You've been checked out of this house for years. Mom kept this place alive. Without her, he shrugged. I mean, face it. This house runs because of Vanessa and me now. You're kind of just along for the ride. There was a silence. Carol's sister turned her face away. Frank, across the room, went very still. I looked at my son. He wasn't angry when he said it. He wasn't even trying to wound me. That was the worst part. He said it the way you'd state the weather. Flat, easy, certain. As if it had been true for so long it didn't require any care in the saying. I put my beer down on the mantel next to Carol's photo. Excuse me, I said. I need to get some air. I walked out through the front door. Not the back where the party was. The front. I stood on the porch steps in the September air, and I looked at the oak tree in the yard, the same one Derek had broken his arm falling out of when he was 9, and I stood there for a long time. Frank found me about 10 minutes later. He just stood beside me, the way he does, hands in his pockets, not saying anything at first. I heard it. He finally said, I know. You going back in? I thought about that. I thought about Carol, and the 35 years, and the $200 in cash that was supposed to cover $1,000 in unauthorized charges, and the off-brand soup, and the sound of Vanessa's voice saying he's just going to be here like I was an inconvenience in my own home. Yes, I said, but not for long. I went back in. I shook hands. I hugged Carol's sister. I thanked Linda for making the drive. I smiled, the way you smile when something has shifted inside you, but you're not ready to show it yet. Derek circulated nearby, still charming, still easy, unaware that anything had changed. After the last guest left and Vanessa began complaining about how long cleanup would take, I told them I was tired and was going to bed early. Derek clapped me on the shoulder. Vanessa said something about leaving the leftover food on the counter. I went upstairs. I did not go to bed. I sat in the chair by the window in mine and Carol's bedroom, and I thought through everything slowly and carefully, the way I had thought through load calculations for 35 years. You identify the weight. You identify the structure. You determine what can hold and what cannot. What could not hold. This. I picked up my phone and I called my brother-in-law, Richard. He's a real estate attorney in Columbus, and he'd been gently asking me to take stock of the situation for the better part of 2 years. I'd always waved him off. I hadn't been ready. Richard, I said, I need you to walk me through my options. He was quiet for a moment. Then, okay, Ed. I'm listening. We talked for an hour. I took notes on the back of an envelope. When we hung up, it was past midnight, and I was calmer than I had been in years. The next morning I drove to my bank branch when it opened at 9. I asked to speak with someone about account changes. A young woman named Monica sat with me at a small desk and I explained, quietly and clearly, what I needed. I removed Derek's authorized user status from both credit cards. I changed the PIN on my debit card. I asked Monica to flag any new account applications made from my address for review. She did all of this without blinking. People who work in banks have seen everything. I thanked her and drove home. Derek was in the kitchen making coffee when I walked in. He looked up, surprised. Didn't hear you leave. I had some errands, I said. I poured myself a cup from the pot he'd already made and sat down at the kitchen table. He sat across from me, relaxed, scrolling through his phone. Listen, I said. I've been thinking about things. Yeah? He didn't look up. I want to talk about the house. That got his attention. He set his phone down. I've decided to sell, I said. The silence lasted about 3 seconds. Then, what? I've been in this house for 32 years. It's too large for one person, and I've been thinking about something smaller, closer to Richard and Susan in Columbus, maybe in a 5-5+ community. I had rehearsed this. My voice stayed level. The market's good right now. Richard thinks we could list in 6 weeks. Derek's face went through several things in quick succession. Surprise. Then confusion. Then something harder. Dad, you can't just we live here. Vanessa and I live here. I know, I said. You'll need to make arrangements. Richard says 60 days notice is standard in Michigan, but I want to be fair, so I'll give you 90. 90. He stopped. He stared at me. Are you serious right now? This is our home. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and I thought about the word our. I thought about every month he had lived in this house for free. Every dinner I'd cooked that no one thanked me for. The Christmas when Vanessa rearranged the living room furniture without asking me, and I moved it back after they went to bed, and she moved it again the next morning. The Tuesday I came home from a late shift to find they'd had 6 friends over, and the kitchen looked like a college party. It's my home, I said. Not unkindly, just truthfully. Derek pushed back from the table. He paced to the window and back. Where is this coming from? Because of last night? Dad, if I said something that upset you, I'm sorry, but this is you. Can't just blow up our lives over one comment. It wasn't one comment, I said. And I'm not blowing anything up. I'm making a decision about my own property. You're 32 years old, Derek. You're capable of providing a home for yourself. I should have required that of you years ago. I paused. That's on me. I waited too long. He called me selfish. He said I was abandoning him. He said Carol would be devastated. That one landed. I won't pretend it didn't. But I thought about Carol, the real Carol, the woman who raised him, who worked a full-time job and still kept this house, and never once let him believe the world owed him anything. And I didn't think she would be devastated. I thought she would be 3 years past tired. Vanessa came downstairs midway through, and the temperature in the kitchen dropped 10 degrees. She was furious in a way that was almost impressive, a perfectly constructed outrage. And she directed it all at me, my ingratitude, my timing, my selfishness, my failure to appreciate everything they had done for this household. I let her finish. Then I said, "I'll put together a list of apartment complexes in the area. Some of them have good move-in specials right now." She looked at me like I had grown a second head. I went upstairs and called Frank to ask if he wanted to get breakfast. The next few weeks were not easy. Derek cycled through anger, then cold silence, then a version of remorse that felt like negotiation, sudden help with yard work, offers to cook dinner, one conversation where he almost said something real before Vanessa called him from the other room and he left mid-sentence. I watched all of it with something that wasn't quite sadness and wasn't quite relief, something between the two. The grief of seeing clearly after a long time of choosing not to. I kept moving forward. I had the house assessed. I called a realtor named Patricia, who had sold 3 houses on our street in the past 5 years. I began quietly sorting through 32 years of accumulated living, separating what was mine and what could go to donation and what needed to be stored. I found Carol's recipe box in the back of the pantry, behind a bag of rice no one had touched in years. I sat on the kitchen floor and read through every index card in her handwriting and cried for about 20 minutes. And then I put the box carefully in a moving carton marked Keep. Frank came over most evenings. He'd sit at the kitchen table and we'd talk, or not talk, or watch the Tigers lose, which they did regularly and without apology. One evening he said, "You ever think you're being too hard on the kid?" "Every day," I said. And I keep thinking about what another 5 years looks like if I don't do this." He nodded slowly. "Carol would have done it sooner." "Yeah," I said. "She would have." Derek knocked on my bedroom door 4 days before the listing went live. He came in and sat on the edge of the bed the way he used to as a boy, knees together, hands in his lap. He looked younger suddenly, and tired. "Dad," he said, "I don't know how to fix this." "I know," I said. "I didn't mean it. What I said at the party. I don't think you're just along for the ride." "I don't." He was quiet for a moment. "I think I've been scared. That you'd retire and I'd have to, I don't know, grow up all the way. And it was easier to make it about you than to look at what Vanessa and I have been doing. This was more than he'd ever given me. I want to be honest about that." I sat with it. "I believe you," I said. "And I love you. That part never changes, no matter what. But Derek, you used my credit card. For years. You let me eat soup while you ate out 3 nights a week. You let Vanessa tell me how to live in my own house. You stood in my living room with my friends and colleagues, and you told me I was along for the ride." I looked at him steadily. "An apology doesn't rebuild that. Action does." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "So, there's nothing I can do." "There's everything you can do," I said. "Get an apartment. Support yourself. Build a real life. Call me on Sundays. Come to Columbus for Thanksgiving. Prove it over time." He sat there for a while longer. I let him. The house sold in 11 days. I found a 2-bedroom condo in a quiet development 20 minutes from Richard and Susan, with a screened porch facing a small pond and a kitchen with enough counter space to actually cook in. I had the floors refinished. I hung Carol's Asheville photo above the fireplace. I put her recipe box on the shelf above the new counter, where I can see it from the sink. Derek and Vanessa found a 1-bedroom apartment on the other side of Dearborn. She had a job she'd mentioned casually. It turned out to be a real job with real hours that she had never needed to take seriously before because my house didn't require it. Derek found a position in project coordination at a construction company downtown. I don't know if it was my decision that pushed him there, or if the push had been coming for a long time and just needed a reason to happen. I choose to think both. He called me the first Sunday after I moved in. It lasted 47 minutes. We talked about the Tigers, about a project at his new job, about a memory he had of helping me rake leaves as a kid. He didn't apologize again. He didn't need to. We both knew where we were. I stood at my screened porch window when we hung up, looking at the pond in the evening light. There were 2 geese on the far bank who had apparently decided the pond belonged to them, and I watched them argue about it for a while. There is a version of this story where I stayed, where I swallowed that night the way I had swallowed every night before it, where I told myself it wasn't that bad, that he didn't mean it, that this was just how it was. I know that version well. I lived it for years. But there is something that happens when you have spent 35 years calculating exactly how much weight a structure can hold. You start to recognize the moment before failure, the quiet before the crack. I recognized it on my back porch, standing next to Frank, looking at the oak tree. I had built something in my life, a career, a home, a family that started with 2 people and 1 good oak tree. Carol and I had done that together, and when she left, I had held on to everything I could reach. I held on so long, I forgot that holding isn't the same as living. She would have told me that directly, in the kitchen, probably on a Tuesday morning over coffee. She would have set her mug down and looked at me with those eyes and said, "Edward, you are not a guest in your own life. Stop acting like one. I live alone now." That's the part people think should be the sad part. It isn't. I wake up in the morning and the house is quiet in a way that belongs to me. I cook what I want to eat. I read until midnight if I feel like it. I have Frank over on Sunday afternoons and we watch football and disagree about everything, and it's the best 4 hours of my week. Carol's sister calls from Phoenix on Thursdays. I signed up for a woodworking class at the community center and I am, by all objective measures, terrible at it. And I go every single week. Last month I drove back to Dearborn and had lunch with Derek. Just the 2 of us. At a diner on Michigan Avenue. The kind of place with coffee and ceramic mugs and pie under a glass dome on the counter. We split a piece of cherry pie, and he told me about a project he was proud of, and I told him about a bench I was building that kept going sideways, and we laughed in the way we hadn't laughed in years. When we stood up to leave, he said, "Dad, just that, first. Then, I know I cost you a lot. I'm sorry." I put my hand on his shoulder. "Don't cost me anything going forward," I said. "That's all I need." He nodded. He paid the check before I could reach for my wallet, and I let him. Walking back to my car in the October cold, I thought about what it means to be a father. The years when it looks like sacrifice, and it is sacrifice, real and heavy, and the moment when you finally understand that sacrifice without a boundary isn't love. It's just disappearing. Carol knew that. She tried to show me. I just needed to stand in a parking lot at 64 years old, with a box of desk photos and a stolen company pen, before I was finally ready to learn it.